Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and a happy World Cities Day. My name is Wendy Atieno, and I work with IUCN's Ecosystem-based Adaptation team in Washington, D.C. Welcome to this webinar, Ecosystem-based Adaptation in Cities, People, Nature, and Justice. I will serve as facilitator for this webinar, which is hosted by IUCN FEBA, PlanAdapt, and the Green-Gray Community of Practice. Before I open the floor to my colleagues, I would like to start with some general housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed on the IUCN YouTube page. If you would not like to be recorded, I kindly ask you to leave the webinar and instead watch the live stream. The link is on this screen. I will just cue it up right now. There we go. So the link is on your screen. And has been posted in the chat. You will still be able to submit questions during the Q&A. This will be a 90-minute webinar with a keynote speaker, 3 presentations of urban EBA in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, followed by a Q&A session. We have the chat and Q&A feature open for those participating in the webinar, so please feel free to engage there. You can upvote any questions that are posted which you would like to see answered. This will help us prioritize questions. It's great to have you all here. Some of you are joining us before dawn. Some of you are spending your Friday evening with us. Thank you so much. In the next 90 minutes, we'll hear case studies across the spectrum of urban EBA approaches with a key question in mind. How can we protect, restore, and fund nature in cities while responding to the negative impacts of climate change? We look forward to an engaging and insightful conversation. With that, I would like to introduce my colleagues and the co-hosts of today's event, Emily Goodwin, who's the coordinator of the Friends of EBA, Jessie DeMaria Kenny, who's the senior expert for climate change adaptation, nature-based solutions, and research for impact at PlanAdapt, and Emily Corwin, who's the director of nature-based engineering solutions with Conservation International. Emily G, Emily C, and Jessie, would you turn on your videos? Great, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to you to just explain a little bit about FEBA, PlanAdapt, and the Urban EBA Working Group, as well as the Green-Gray Community of Practice.
Thank you, Wendy. As Wendy mentioned, my name is Emily Goodwin. I work on IUCN's Ecosystem-based Adaptation team, and I'm also the coordinator of the FIBA network. FIBA is a global collaborative network of more than 85 different agencies and organizations involved in ecosystem-based adaptation, working jointly to share our experiences and knowledge to improve the implementation of EBA activities on the ground, and through collaboration to have a stronger and more strategic learning and policy influence on EBA. The concept of EBA was introduced more than 12 years ago now, and over these years, EBA has really paved the way for the wider uptake of working with nature as a cornerstone of adaptation strategies to simultaneously address climate risks, the biodiversity crisis, and human well-being. It's been wonderful now to see that diverse FIBA members have come together to tackle some of these key questions on the roles and benefits of incorporating nature into urban adaptation approaches, and to consider EBA approaches across the spectrum of green and gray, and really push both the traditional infrastructure community as well as the conservation community to think outside of the box. A big thank you to both PlanAdapt and Conservation International for working to coordinate FIBA members on these topics and lead these discussions. So we look forward to continuing this work with the FIBA network to mainstream some of the guidance and lessons learned and opportunities on urban EBA and green-gray infrastructure across different FIBA members around the world, and really support scaling up of this work in urban systems around the world. I'll hand it over to Jessie.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Emily G. Thank you, Wendy. And of course, thank you all for joining us today. My name is Jessie DeMaria Kinney with PlanAdapt. And I'd like to share a brief background on the FIBA Urban EBA Working Group. I don't think I need to convince anyone here about the importance of nature-based solutions or EBA. And if I do, well, I'm not going to go into detail now, and I'll let the case studies speak for themselves. But first, for those of you who don't know PlanAdapt, we're an independent global network organization. We provide knowledge services in support of effective, economically just, and socially inclusive climate change adaptation and climate risk management. And we believe that knowledge about how to best adapt to future climate risk is still not reaching the people in the areas where it's most needed. But knowledge isn't only about outputs and knowledge transfer or push communications. The inputs for knowledge generation and its eventual use are equally and perhaps arguably even more important. Also, we recognize that the context is of critical importance in development and adaptation. And the replication or the scaling out of initiatives or adaptation measures are not easily transferable from one context to the next. And the same applies from the global north to the global south, as urban EBA measures cannot necessarily be taken from the north and implemented in the south, or vice versa. The context, the needs, and the relationships with nature are often so different that tailored measures must be done to ensure successful implementation. So why the working group? We're working on PlanAdapt was working on an urban EBA project in the central coast of Vietnam to identify urban EBA measures for a city. And during the desk review and preparing the final proposed measures, we realized that while there are many online portals with lots of information on EBA in general, this isn't the same for urban EBA, and much less so for urban EBA in the global south. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some excellent examples and excellent online resources from Europe and elsewhere. There's the Naturevation Project, the European Climate Adaptation Platform, or PlanAdapt, and the Panorama Platform, which has a wealth of information from the global north and the global south. There's also the UNEP Asia Pacific Urban EBA Project, which is very interesting, but has very limited information on the actual measures. And the Ecosystem-based Adaptation through South-South Cooperation's Urban EBA Library holds excellent potential as a resource, but at the moment, it lacks content. And even We Adapt, which is one of my favorite online platforms, does not have much when you get down to the nitty-gritty of how to do urban EBA. For example, what are the specific urban EBA measures? Are they bioswales and sustainable urban drainage systems, or SUDs? Is it urban wetland restoration, or green walls and vertical gardens? And how do they fit together and into a broader adaptation strategy? How participatory were the identification, design, and implementation processes? And were the marginalized voices heard, or even better, prioritized during these processes? So we wanted to find out more. And the Urban EBA Working Group brings together researchers and practitioners from the fields of urban development, EBA, and green-gray infrastructure to identify and compile practical examples of this, the nuts and bolts of urban EBA planning and implementation. And this compilation, which is aided through an online survey, which is live and the link will be shared, will contribute to the knowledge base of this growing area of, in theory and practice, of urban EBA. And this survey particularly has a focus on the global south, but welcomes examples from everywhere. And the results of this will contribute to a joint FIBA technical paper highlighting the findings from the survey and our analysis. This was the main impetus for the working group. And of course, as I said, we wanted to bring in a wide variety of actors in this. And this is, again, one of the reasons why this is co-hosted between PlanAdapt, the FIBA network, and the Green-Gray Community of Practice. So Emily C., over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Jesse. And my name is Emily Corwin, and I'm the Director of Nature-Based Engineering Solutions at Conservation International. Last June, we launched a global green-gray community of practice. And since then, we've grown to include members representing over 60 different organizations spanning the globe and with expertise in engineering, construction, conservation, restoration, finance, and economics, a truly multidisciplinary group. And we're all working to advance the innovation and implementation of green-gray infrastructure. And green-gray infrastructure is a type of ecosystem-based adaptation that's combining the restoration and conservation of ecosystems with the selective use of conventional engineering approaches to provide people with climate adaptation and climate resilient outcomes. So on a personal note, there's a lot to get down about in the world today. And one of the things that brings me hope is learning and hearing about the types of EBA examples that we're going to hear about today. And another thing that makes me hopeful is really the incredible motivation and dedication of our colleagues in the green-gray community of practice. We're working for a better future for human and ecosystem health, biodiversity, and climate outcomes. So if you're similarly working on urban EBA, or green-gray projects, we'd really welcome your collaboration in our community of practice. And I'll paste a link in the chat where you can learn more. So a huge thanks to IUCN and FEBA and PlanAdapt for inviting us to co-host this event today. It's really an honor and a joy to be have worked with you, collaborated on this, and look forward to future collaborations as well. So with that, I will pass it back to Wendy.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily G, Jesse, and Emily C. It's quite a mouthful in the working group, but we love our Emilys. So the next thing that we're going to do now is we want to hear from you. Both the people who are participating in the webinar and the people who are watching the live stream on YouTube. And how we're going to do this is through Mentimeter. Give me 1 second to get everything queued up. Yes, so via Mentimeter, everybody on your device, if you're watching this on your computer, if you want to open another tab, or on your phone, go to www.mentimeter.com and type in the code 7152779. So the code is 7152779, and you can find that at the top of your screen. We're going to use that to vote on a couple of questions, given that for the next 90 minutes, we're going to be hearing from our speakers, but we also want to get your sense of urban EBA based on the work that you're doing on the ground. Just waiting for the questions to pop up. Okay, great. And the code is also in the chat. So our first question that we're going to be voting on is, how important is a climate justice lens in planning urban EBA initiatives? How important is a climate justice lens in planning urban EBA initiatives? Choices are, and I can see the votes are coming in already, somewhat important, important, very important, or unimportant. Great, so we have just a couple more seconds on this. I think everybody was very on top of this one, great. People think that it is very important, and we agree with you. Given the, that the people who are bound to suffer the most from climate change impacts have contributed the least, thinking about how to make it a more just approach, how to have more just approaches is very important to the work that we do. People say somewhat important. I would love it if you're in the chat to give more information about why you think it's somewhat important. And as we do that, we're going to move on to the next question. What barriers do we need to overcome, and what tools or knowledge products can we create to enable successful implementation? So this is a two-part question. First, it's a question about barriers. What are the barriers that we need to overcome? And the second part is, what tools and knowledge products do we need in order to implement EBA successfully in urban contexts? Financing, I was expecting that to be one of the very first ones. Context specific, yes, and one of the benefits indeed of EBA is that you're working within a very specific ecosystem, and you're working very much with the context in the area. Policies, political will, financing again. Keep your answers coming. All right, capacity development, that would be good. And when you're talking about capacity development, I think a question to follow up with that is, what kind of capacity? Is it capacity to implement EBA? Is it capacity to identify EBA strategies? That is a good question. Making people aware of the urgency and that capitalism cannot solve climate change. Settler colonial mentality. Increase confidence. Great. Oh, female empowerment. All right. So we'll move on to the final question. This is important. We are in this new normal, but thinking about moving beyond 2020 and COVID-19, how can we drive post-COVID stimulus investments to fund EBA or green-gray infrastructure? So how are we thinking about, again, when we're talking about vulnerability, I think all of these vulnerabilities map over each other. So you have climate vulnerability, you do have COVID vulnerability. I think they all map over one another. So how do we address this challenge, this present moment that we're in, thinking in the broader context of climate change? So excited to hear your answers. Involve communities, definitely important. The Green New Deal, thinking about green jobs, specific language of EBA into policies, mainstreaming into other sectors. So someone said Ministry of Finance, but thinking also about the Ministry of Planning, because those are the people who hold the purse. Multi-sectoral engagement is something that came in the chat, which I think ties in back to the question of involving ministries beyond the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Water, the Ministry of Environment, going beyond our silos. Requiring set funding for these types of projects, I think ties in with that as well. All right, great. Well, thank you, everybody. We'll keep going on with these Mentimeter polls, and we will provide a survey, summary at the end. So don't, log out of your browser and of your phone as well. Just keep the code handy. Our first speaker today is Kimberly Pope. She is the lead on Nature Positive Cities and Infrastructure at the World Economic Forum. Kimberly, if you haven't already, would you turn on your video?
Hi, Wendy.
Oh, great. There you go. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm just delighted to be here to talk about the many opportunities for what we call a nature positive transformation of our cities. First, I'd like to commend everyone participating for their action and leadership on green cities. So today I'm going to talk about three things. First, what is the context in which we're working? Second, what are the risks and opportunities related to cities and biodiversity as identified in the World Economic Forum's New Nature Economy Report series? And third, what are we at the forum doing in this space to expand opportunities, better engage stakeholders, and how can you get involved? So we all know that today we're faced with multiple and interrelated crises. The climate crisis is happening before our eyes. This year, we've seen record fires in the Arctic, the Amazon River Basin, and my own home country of the US and California and throughout the West Coast. We have a crisis in nature with over 1 million species threatened with extinction and 1/5 of the world's countries at risk of total ecosystem collapse. We have a social justice crisis with over 70% of the world's population being negatively impacted by rising inequality. And as Wendy said earlier, we know that the people who will be most impacted by climate change have contributed the least to greenhouse gas emissions. Systematic transformation is needed to realize a climate, nature, and people positive growth and development paradigm. Cities, suburbs, and the global infrastructure system have a great impact on nature and climate, affecting nearly 1/3 of all threatened species. And cities alone are responsible for 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions. As a part of this new paradigm, we must reimagine our cities. And right now we have a vital window of action as the COVID-19 pandemic has challenged our assumptions about city living, work, transportation. And cities have experienced devastating health and economic consequences from the pandemic, in particular in low-income neighborhoods. And many people have decided, at least in the short term, to leave cities for either personal or economic reasons. For those that have stayed, however, a transformation occurred. At the height of the pandemic, we all saw the clean waterways in Venice, clear skies in New Delhi, and in many places, even as cities reopened, traffic was lighter. People found new solace in reconnecting with cities' green spaces, often their only place for exercise and entertainment. Streets were transformed, and in New York City, for example, where I spent 10 years of my life, those streets may permanently stay closed to cars, which we're so excited about, creating more space for outdoor eating and bike lanes. It is important to note, however, that access to these green spaces is not equal. Affluent areas typically have more green spaces and access to nature, less pollution, and more space for physical activity. In London, for example, the wealthiest areas have around 10% more public spaces comparatively. As we look to a post-COVID-19 future, we must use this vital moment to reimagine cities all over the world to make them greener and more inclusive. Nature positive transitions and nature-based solutions are a key part of this, and we will hear some exciting case studies about this later. So Wendy, if you could go to the next slide. Oh, Wendy, if you could put up the slides, that would be great. And then there'll be a slide on our New Nature Economy Report series. So the World Economic Forum's New Nature Economy Report series aims to make the business and economic case for nature. The first report, entitled Nature Risk Rising, released in January, highlights the hidden dependencies of business and economies on nature and their vulnerabilities to nature loss. The report found that $44 trillion, over half of the world's GDP, is highly or moderately dependent on nature. Could you just go back one slide? Perfect, exactly. The second report in the series, The Future of Nature and Business, was released in July of this year. The report details nature-positive transitions needed to transform the socioeconomic systems with the greatest impact on nature. One of these systems is the infrastructure and built environment, which has the second greatest overall impact on nature. For example, 66%. That's the total increase in the footprint of our built environment in the first 12 years of the century alone. Buildings and cities now consume a whopping 30% of all energy produced. And 2/3 of the world's population, or about 5.2 billion people, rely on water and sanitation systems that are inadequate at best and deadly at worst. Nearly 85% of all wetlands, nature's water filters, have been destroyed. And shockingly, roadkill has overtaken hunting as a leading cause for animal deaths. Could you now go to the next slide? So what can be done? There are 5 nature-positive transitions required in the infrastructure and built environment system to address these issues. Importantly, these transitions have the potential to unlock business opportunities worth $3 trillion annually and could create up to 117 million jobs by 2030. So these 5 transitions, the first is a compact built environment, which means improving urban planning and design to protect critical ecosystems and promoting a compact development in existing and new cities. The second transition is a nature-positive built environment, which means leveraging nature for heating, cooling, and lighting. The third is a planet-compatible urban utilities, which means smarter and cleaner utilities and 4IR solutions. Fourth is nature as infrastructure, which means we must protect and restore natural ecosystems to build resilience. And finally, nature-positive connecting infrastructure, or the creation of better, smarter, and safer logistical links between urban areas. In the Future Nature and Business report, there are many more solutions and examples of what these changes and transitions look like on the ground. You can find the full report and our other New Nature Economy Report series on the forum website. Can you go to the next slide, Wendy? So what is the forum doing in this space? Well, this summer we launched our platform for accelerating nature-based solutions, and we're already implementing several new initiatives and partnerships under this platform. First, I'm just delighted to announce that we've launched a new and exciting partnership with the government of Colombia, the Alexander von Humboldt Institute, and others on biodiverse cities, which will support a global vision of nature-positive cities. This initiative has the dual objective of 1, establishing and socializing a shared concept, framework, and forward-looking perspective on nature-positive cities. And number 2, catalyzing decisive and innovative multi-stakeholder efforts. In short, we're going to be looking at how we can make cities of the future operate in harmony with nature, and that all urban dwellers enjoy a mutually beneficial relationship with nature. As a first step, we're going to be establishing a commission of experts who will be developing this global framework on biodiverse cities, and we expect that nature-based solutions will play a very key role in this framework and vision. After the framework is developed, we're going to look to source innovative solutions through the forum's Uplink platform, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and to catalyze public-private partnerships through our communities and networks. Another initiative under our NBS platform is the 1T.org or Trillion Trees Initiative, which serves a global movement to conserve, restore, and grow 1 trillion trees by 2030. A part of this work is urban reforesting, which is an important nature-based solution that also contributes to climate change adaptation in cities. Trees in cities provide many benefits like regulating temperature, reducing noise pollution, and cleaning the air. Restoring urban and peri-urban environments can provide resilient and safe freshwater supplies and protect cities from storms and floods. Working with nature can save urban utilities millions of dollars, as we detailed in the Future of Nature and Business report. 1T.org is working to raise private sector ambition and scale multi-stakeholder action by connecting grassroots projects with partnership opportunities, or as we say, connecting grassroots with grass tops. One of the priority regions is the US, and 1T.org has launched an exciting partnership with American forests, which include a very strong focus on tree equity. Finally, the forum's uplink digital platform connects the world's best innovators to global decision makers through innovation competitions in order to accelerate SDG delivery. We envision having uplink competitions for 1T.org in the Amazon and Sahel regions, and also plan one for biodiverse cities later next year. 1T.org ran its first innovation challenge this summer, which had over 250 applications. Of these, 20 were selected as winners and will participate in the accelerator. Wendy, if you could go to the next slide. So how can you get engaged? As a part of our city's focus work, we're interested in highlighting what we're calling lighthouse projects, for instance, on reforestation, biodiverse cities, circular bioeconomies, and more. So please do reach out to share information about your great projects with high potential for scaling. Also, we'll be running, as I had mentioned earlier, Uplink Accelerator challenges. So please do sign up to the 1T.org newsletter and check the Uplink webpage to stay informed about opportunities to participate. You can also connect with the Shapers Hub in your city. The Global Shapers community at the forum is a network of young people driving dialogue, action, and change, and has prioritized the environment as one of their key areas of focus. So please do be in touch and find the Shapers community closest to you. Finally, we're happy to facilitate introductions to the members of our existing Uplink cohort, like Suji Partners and Earthwatch Europe, that are doing really exciting things about reforesting. So to close, by accelerating nature-positive transitions and restoring natural systems present in and around cities, we can help transform cities' water systems, protect them from floods and extreme weather events, increase their resiliency and ability to adapt to climate change, and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, among other benefits for the planet and people. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to the presentation of the case studies. Please do reach out to me with any ideas for collaboration. Thanks again. Back over to you, Wendy.
Great. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I do appreciate your comments. A lot of that was coming up to me on the slides was about multi-stakeholder engagement, and we did have that pop up in the previous Q&A session in the chat. And I think this is important for us to think about going ahead. And so our second speaker of today is Natalia Acero. Natalia is the Director of Water and Cities with Conservation International in Colombia. She will present our first EBA case study from Bogota. And thank you so much to Natalia, because she's actually in the field today. So we do appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Wendy. And thank you everyone for joining today. Wendy, I'm not able to see my slides. I don't know if you, okay, thank you so much. Well, as Wendy said, my name is Natalia Acero. I'm the Water and Cities Director for Conservation International Colombia. We are going to present today one specific exercise that we've been doing in the urban creeks of Bogota. And our main focus of this presentation is that there is a social challenge beyond the ecological restoration of EBA in urban areas. Next slide, please. We as CI Colombia have been working for the last 10 years in develop a sustainable landscape surrounding Bogota in order to be able to guarantee water resources for the city and 22 municipalities surrounding Bogota. Bogota is the capital of Colombia. It has around 8 million people, and in this sustainable landscape that you can see now in this slide, it's around 10 to 12 people of living and these key ecosystems that are called high ambient ecosystems, which are basically cloud forests and páramos. As you can see in this slide, the gray area where is located Bogota is surrounded by mountains. We are in 2,600 meters above sea level. And all these mountains surrounded are key for the sustainability and the fact that Bogota is a competitive city in Latin America. So we have a program for around 10 years and a strategy that wants to develop and restore key ecosystems in the rural areas, in peri-urban areas, and within the city. So what I'm going to show you today is what we are doing specifically in that area where the border between the city and nature is under dynamics. Every single day changes, right? So with nature and how that are orders of degradation, but at the same time is an opportunity to improve and to conserve key ecosystems. So next slide, Wendy, please. The first thing that we did to understand how we implement ecosystem-based adaptation in the city was to understand what is the climate risk for this area. So in the maps that we are going to show you in the next slide, I'm not able to see it, Wendy. I don't know if you change it. We can see the RCP 6 scenarios for temperature and precipitation, and we can see what is the change that these two variables are going to is going to change. So as you can see, Bogota is that gray area in the west part of the sustainable landscape. Precipitation is only going to change around 10% of what we know right now. Other areas of the paramos of the corridor has like higher or bigger changes, especially in the north, where you can see we can going to have a 30% of increase in precipitation. Also, talking about temperature, that is the map on the left, temperature is only going to change in the area surrounding Bogota around 0.6 centigrades. So it's not going to be a huge change. This is a scenarios for 2040. And if you can relate with the climate risk map on the right, the red areas are where we are going to have a higher climate risk. You can see that Bogota, in comparison of the other areas of the corridor, has like low risk. But what does this mean in the reality in the city? So next slide, Wendy, please. This was an event in December 2019 where we have an extreme event of precipitation and the city basically collapsed. You can see there is one of the biggest roads in Bogota and was completely flooded. It causes like great economical damages, and the city was paralyzed. And in terms of and science says, well, it's not that high the climate risks for the city. We are in a good shape, but in the reality is when you are going to see that extreme events, city collapses. So how we can adapt to these changes, how we can adapt to changes in precipitation, and at the same time make that the city is basically able to drive. So next slide, please. Bogota City, this is the border that I was talking before. The city has on the west side of the city, we have a mountain chain. We call it Cerros de Bogotá, Cerros Orientales de Bogotá. And you can see perfectly the border where the city is growing, and then you have these key ecosystems that still provide a lot of benefits, as we saw before in the later presentation. And from those mountains, we have 192 creeks that comes from the paramos and goes all the way or through the city. These creeks provide some benefits to the city. They are not used for water consumption, but they are used for water regulation and to reduce impacts of inorganic and organic materials in the system. Basically, creeks, when they enter to the city, they are just located in a pipe. So what we've been doing is to promote collective action surrounding the Cerros Orientales, the mountains, to try to make that those urban areas and peri-urban areas and the citizens that live there and different stakeholders start protecting those mountains and those creeks in order to improve water systems in Bogota, but at the same time give the citizens an opportunity to be connected with nature. Next slide, please. So I'm going to show you now a specific example of La Quebrada Las Delicias or Las Delicias Creek, which is located in 63th Street in the middle of the city. You can see here that there are some roads surrounding the creek. There are people living just really nearby in the buffer area of the stream. You have the mountains behind it, and this is the way that basically nature goes into the city. So next slide, please. The system or the program that we developed here has basically 3 different strategies. One specifically in the urban area, a next one in the peri-urban area, and then in the natural area where we have a waterfall that is just 30 minutes away, like a walking distance from the 7th Avenue, that is one of the biggest roads in Bogota. So this is just it's not that long, it's less than 5 kilometers, the stream from the waterfall to the pipe where the creek is just put it into the drainage system of the city. And what we developed there was, first of all, a collective action between the communities that live in the 3 different areas of the creek, with the local government and with the regional government trying to implement EBA in the urban areas. So basically what we did, next slide, please. We have, first of all, you can see here in 2008, the creek was full of garbage. It was considered like a very dangerous part of the city. Of course, when in Bogota, especially cities, the urban connection with nature most of the time is about illegal or danger or not feeling safe around it. So the first thing that we had to do was to remove all this garbage, to try to make it to have light during the night. And then well, we did, and if you can move faster, Wendy, on the slides, we did some collaboration with the different stakeholders. We removed that garbage. Then we removed invasive species that were located there. We restore with native species all around the creek, engage and enhance awareness with the schools and different collectives or social collectives that were behind it. So we move and engage a lot of the community. We have the support of local government. And if you can just stop in the slide where you can see the waterfall, I want to stop there and just give a message here, and is that 10 of those guys that you're seeing in that slide, the ones that have like the green shirt, they were thieves. They were people that during the night they hide in that creek, and anyone that could go there, they just rob everything that they have. So we start also like a social restoration. Those 10 young to get involved in tourism activities to try to promote a different economical income for the community that they were there. Actually, in that picture, you can see Walton, one of the richest person in the world. He was financing all this process he was the donor for this process. And in that same picture, you have 10 young men that they were thieves, and at the same time, well, people from different parts of the world and the local government trying to support them. And here is where I think that when we are thinking about ecosystem-based adaptation in urban areas, we need to start thinking about first the scale of or the process of the timeline. We started in 2008, and right now, 10 years ago, we still have to support the community to resolve basically conflicts between them. Restoration, it's been giving a lot of results in terms of stimulation, biodiversity. There are a lot of co-benefits, but at the end, everything depends on the social network and the social restoration. 10 of those guys that started with us, right now, only one is still working as ecotourism in this area, and is the one that is still is active and protecting the creek in order to support all the process and not let die the process. But we have to be very careful and to be very aware about how we restore those social networks. We restore 2.3 hectares, and well, we have 4 different species of birds, and we have a lot of benefits from this restoration. Sorry if I had some issues with communication. I hope I can show you everything I wanted, and you received the message. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Natalia. And thank you as well for highlighting the need to strengthen the connection between urban and nature. And it's quite inspiring to see this social tie-in as well, to be able to have these gentlemen participate in the workshop and convert the image of that particular area of the city. I do appreciate that. As we are continuing, so we've heard from Kimberly and we've heard from Natalia, my apologies. Thinking about, before we move in the next presentation, we would like to hear from you, and from you being the participants. So those watching on the live stream and those in the Q&A in the webinar, it's time for our next Mentimeter question. Oh, sorry, I'm having a little bit of a, there we go. Yes, so our question today, given your experience as environmental practitioners, as urban engineers, as urban planners, what is your sense that EBA has been, urban EBA specifically, has it been implemented more in the global north or in the global south? And you have 4 choices there, where it's more in the global north, more in the global south, or equally for both, or neither. Okay, we are at 63% for the global north and 19% for the global south. My follow-up question here, to be discussed perhaps in the chat, is why do you think it's more in the global north and not in the global, and less in the global south? And a companion question to that, is it a question of definition? You know, as we've been working to discuss this topic, we find that a lot of people implement similar measures, but have different names for it. So we do have urban EBA. We also have nature-based solutions for adaptation. We have green infrastructure, green-gray infrastructure. We have natural infrastructure, natural climate solutions. So perhaps we're all doing the same work or doing similar work in different under different names. So I think, yeah, global north seems to be winning. We have 9% saying neither. I would love to hear more about this, and you know, we can definitely tackle this in the Q&A. Great, I'll give everybody a couple more seconds just to bring in the next few votes. And just as a reminder, again, it's www.mentimeter.com with the code at the very top of the page, as you can see. And so as we're listening, feel free to type in your questions in the Q&A for those participating in the webinar. For those watching the live stream, you'll be able to submit questions during the Q&A session after the presentation. So don't, hold on to your questions. Great. Okay. I think the comments are not coming in anymore. Great. So our next speaker, we have Derek Mayotte. Let me queue up his presentation. And Derek, if you could turn on your video. If you're able to. I know you were having a little bit of issues with video earlier. Great. All right, great, Derek. Derek is the director of Syrup's Environmental Research Organization, and he's presenting on urban mangroves in Mombasa in Kenya. Derek, you can go ahead, and if your video is giving you trouble, feel free to turn off and just use your audio. Not very clearly. Would you mind turning off your video? Wonderful.
Yes, thank you.
Great, we can hear you now.
Yes, my name is Eric Murati. I'm the director of Ecosystem-based Adaptation, and I'll be presenting to you about the urban mangroves of Mombasa, what we are doing here as an organization, and also in partnership with a few other organizations to try and keep our city clean and try to also protect a very unique ecosystem within our country. And it's like working in collaboration with Kenya.
Derek, we're having trouble hearing you. The connection is breaking up a little bit. Once more? Hello?
Can you hear me clearly now? Sorry.
We can hear you, but it's breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I don't happen to have a very stable internet where I am. I'm actually out in the field, but I will be able to walk you through the presentation.
Great, thank you. We can hear you in some moments, but it just cuts out. So let's try and see how best we can do. And thank you as well for participating from the field.
Yes, thank you. So we are trying our best to protect a very unique mangrove ecosystem, and which have been affected majorly by a lot of urban development, which has also brought in lots of resource conflicts based on extraction, illegal logging within the area. Given that we are in a setting, an urban setting with a lot of population, putting in pressure to get resources from the forest bordering Mombasa city. This is a city that has around 1.2 to 1.5 million people, and we are trying as much as we can to balance between urban development, conservation, and also keeping our wetlands so this creek actually experiences a lot of pollution and a lot of degradation that is coming from is coming from exploitation from the communities around. Lots of companies and developments coming out that are affecting this ecosystem, which is causing massive die-outs and big losses in terms of biodiversity in the area, and also in terms of tree service and tree value within the coastal area of Mombasa. So we come in as a network of organizations, community-based organizations, to brainstorm and bring solutions to the current problems, and also looking at mangroves. Mangroves are very unique ecosystems that provide very many values to the ecosystem as large, to the city, to the global environment. And this is what we're trying to fight to keep on our side. So next slide, we're actually experiencing lots of trouble in terms of trying to figure out best approaches and best solutions for keeping the life. We are trying to do lots of research, lots of assessments, looking at what are the causes of degradation. Are we able to reverse these large processes of biodiversity? What are the physical characteristics of these areas? How we as people, we as scientists look at this problem and try to bring a political solution that is suitable for both people, communities, also integrate urban development that is very sustainable and very eco-friendly. So we basically try to involve everybody in the social sectors within stakeholders within the city and the country. We also try to bring in the community to combine for restoration, and also bring in science to lead the whole process, where we try to look at what the chemical and biological aspects of the ecosystems that have been destroyed. How can we try to mitigate these kinds of destructions, and what can we do to keep the mangroves alive, and also try to protect the near and the further future. So with that, next slide, please. We are trying to put together multidisciplinary approach. We're trying to look at how we can plant mangroves trees, and also involve community development at the same time. How can we bring about innovations in technology? How can we bring about stakeholders participation, at the same time try to through logical services or logical systems service provision. This mainly is increasing fishing.
Derek,
fishing,
I think the connection is having quite a bit of trouble. Would you be able to find a place with a little bit better connection, and then we can try and have you present again shortly, perhaps after the next presentation? Do you think that would work?
Yes, please.
Okay,
let
great.
me try to find a stable connection.
Thank you so much. We don't want to miss what you're sharing. All right, great. Well, thank you. We're going to skip ahead to the next presentation, which is by Dr. Mona Lisa Sen. Dr. Mona Lisa, or Dr. Sen rather, is the program coordinator for biodiversity with ICLEI in South Asia, and she'll be sharing experience on EBA from Indian cities. Dr. Mona Lisa, if you would turn on your video.
I hope you can see me.
Yes, we can. Great, thank you.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone from various parts of the globe from where you've all joined. I would like to take this opportunity to just showcase some of the examples of EBAs in cities in India. Can I have the next slide? Wendy, can I have it? Yeah. So just running through what ICLEI is, we're basically an international network of cities. Can I have the next slide? Wherein we work with more than 17,500 cities across the globe. We have 17 secretariats, and I come from the South Asia Secretariat, where just by the name one can understand, we handle work in entire South Asian region. The next slide. We work on 5 interconnected pathways, and nature-based development forms one of our key pathways. So nature-based solutions, EBAs, come as a very integral part of the work that we do, and that also integrates into the other pathways like circular development, resilient development, people-centric development, and low-emission development. The next slide. Just as I explained, I come from the South Asia office, and we cover the entire South Asian region. Can I have the next one? So ICLEI works with cities by implementing projects, by providing technical guidance, as well as doing a lot of capacity building and training for cities. The next slide. Okay, so now I come to some glimpses. EBA, as the word suggests, or even say nature-based solutions, is something which is not very, very common in India. This is something which is slowly, gradually coming up. Biodiversity as such as a sector in urban areas has not got that much emphasis till now. In Indian cities, it's now gradually that with a lot of global movement and a lot of understanding that of significance of biodiversity, that these initiatives are picking up. So this map just highlights some of the pioneering cities in India who are doing such work, but this does not mean that the others are not doing at all. But these are the ones who are the trend leaders or the path breakers whom I put on this map. So you can see some down south cities, some northern cities in India across various states that we have. Next slide. Basically, ecosystem-based adaptation involves, since cities are beginning from the scratch, it involves planning as well as implementation. The detailed planning needs detailed assessments of the biodiversity, ecosystem services, and their conditions as of now. So Indian cities are mostly into a stage of where the assessments have begun and they're going on in various phases. Some of the cities have taken it on further and are doing pilot projects, which I will show a few. Next slide. So coming to planning toolkits or baseline assessments, a lot of cities are now going into developing these natural asset maps. This is for a city called Gangtok, which ICLEI had developed, where this is basically on the GIS platform. The India government has something known as a People's Biodiversity Register. This is as per the Biological Diversity Act of India. So this is a legally valid document wherein the entire biodiversity and the traditional ecological knowledge is compiled and there are several formats that form the register. So where this was very common in the rural areas, now this has picked up in the urban areas as well. The City Biodiversity Index, though it's over 10 years that this was developed by the Singapore National Parks in collaboration with ICLEI, it's picked up very, very recently in India. So there are a few cities who've developed these reports. And the local biodiversity strategy and action plan development at the city level is something which is very, very new to Indian cities. And there are only about 3 or 4 who have done this, though we have National Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan and State Biodiversity Action Plans. So the one that I'm showcasing here is for Kochi Municipal Corporation. This is something, a city down south in India. They have put in a lot of nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based adaptation projects into the strategy action plan. Next slide. Coming to some of the pilot interventions in Kochi, the city is investing on developing a pollinator garden, a herbal garden, as well as an interpretation center. This is in one of the parks in the city. One aspect of this is to showcase to the citizens the need for conservation, and the other aspect is to increase the pollinator base and the local biodiversity base in the city. This is a project which we are doing in collaboration with the city. The next slide. This project focuses on ecological restoration of one of the biggest canals in the city. So this has canal revival through organic waste composting, as well as a development of the rejuvenation of the canal, and developing a mangrove plantation along the canal banks. This is something which we are also doing with the city, and city on its own is also taking this ahead further. Next slide. This is a work which we did somewhere in Western India. So this city called Jaisalmer, this is a drought-prone area. They have revived a pond through traditional rainwater harvesting systems and done a lot of plantation through community support. So now this pond is full of water throughout the year. This is a state which is very, very drought-prone next to the Thar Desert in India. And the other aspect of it was solid waste management, wherein now they have converted the organic waste into vermicompost, which the local farmers use. Another city in India called keep the next slide. The next slide, please. Another city in India, this is again a heavily drought-prone area in the state called Maharashtra in India. Here, the village and the city, the rural and the urban got together to rejuvenate a lake, which is the water source for the village as well as the city. So this has been done through a constructed wetland chain, and the untreated sewage was passed through the constructed wetland, and now clean water goes into the lake, which has also helped revive the lake, which used to completely dry up in the summer seasons. Now water is retained, and it's of a very good, high and potable quality. Next slide. Coming to some of the other aspects wherein now degradation in Indian projects, Indian context is also being looked at from ecosystem service, biodiversity angles, as well as climate vulnerability angles. So it's an intersection of all these four type of components, which is bringing in a degradation analysis. Next slide. This is something which is happening in the high altitude Himalayan regions where the ecosystem-based approach is being followed to understand the levels of degradation. Can I have the next slide? So ecosystem-based approach has a lot of qualitative interviews, focus group discussions. The next slide, participatory resource maps. The next slide. This is the kind of community maps that are being developed to understand the changes in the ecosystem services. A lot of questionnaire surveys, which is showing what are the ecosystem services that the community, both living there as well as living downstream in the cities, are relying on, and how this has changed over time to understand what is the impact of the ecosystem service change due to the degradation in the landscape. The next slide. Using this, an eco-restoration program is being developed for those high altitude areas. We also understand that ecosystem-based adaptation or nature-based solutions needs extensive amount of awareness generation. So some of the natural asset maps that we had developed with the support of an artist, we've converted them into illustrated natural asset maps, which makes the common man understand how much urban biodiversity they have, what is the significance, and why they should be conserving it. So the cities have now been putting these up at various critical locations in their cities so that the information is spread further. We've also been doing a lot of graphic books and comic books. The one shown here is something called Hope in the City, which we have recently developed. And this shows the significance of nature-based solutions to fight climate change for cities. All this is freely available online, and we have been promoting this in all cities to be using this for their citizen awareness. Next slide. So overall, we feel that there is a lot of interdepartmental coordination which is required. There needs to be an integrated support to mainstream biodiversity conservation and ecosystem services into urban planning. As of now, these two sectors run parallelly and they never meet, at least in Indian conditions. There needs to be strict enforcement, and there is a lot of investment that is required in data collection, monitoring, and evaluation. One thing which I forgot to put here is capacity building of all the urban local bodies is needed to understand nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptations, what they are, how to identify them, how to implement them, and how to monitor and evaluate them. I think that's the last slide. Yeah. Thank you. This is a very brief presentation of the kind of work that we are doing, and I'm open to questions.
Yes, thank you so much for this. And we understand the time constraints, but we will have a Q&A session. And we hope that this is just the beginning of the conversation, right? That we'll be able to have more engaging, more robust conversation about urban EBA going forward. So proceeding on to next, we're going to do our next Mentimeter poll. So again, the question here, what is giving you hope? I know that initially, there we go. I know that Emily C had touched on it on her in her introduction earlier, talking about the things that are giving her hope in 2020. And so the question is, we're posing the question to you as well. What is giving you hope? Go to www.mentimeter.com. The code is 7152779. So we see young people, grassroots movements, people as well, a shared vision and social movements, recognizing systemic racism. And I think that's something that has come up across globally in the wake of the protests in the US in June that sparked global protests around the world. So having these social movements and having people who are willing to challenge the systems that we are under, technologies and people, and ensuring these are integrated into policy. All right, we'll just have a few more of these come in, and we're going to try and reconnect with Derek and see what's the best way to have him present his case study and share the experience from coastal Kenya. And just a reminder again to pose your questions in the Q&A. We will answer those in the Q&A session. I think we're still having trouble connecting with Derek. He just messaged to say he's all set. I think we're still having trouble connecting with Derek. Okay, it looks like we're still having trouble connecting with Derek. I think we will skip ahead, unfortunately, to the Q&A session. And so thank you again to our speakers and our presenters. We've had Kimberly Pope from the World Economic Forum, as well as Mona Lisa Sen from ICLEI in South Asia, and Natalia Acero, who's presented a case study in Bogota. We'll continue to try and connect with Derek. And so if it works out, we do have a little bit of time on the schedule, but we will proceed with the Q&A. And so if I may have all our speakers come back on. It's unfortunate to move into the Q&A before we finish with the presentations, but you know, the realities of working in post-COVID or during COVID is sometimes we have connection issues. Jesse.
Great. You want me to take over from here then?
Yes, please.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Mona Lisa, Natalia, and Derek. Thank you also. We got some of it, but not all of it, as Wendy said, unfortunately. I found the presentations really interesting. I've made lots of notes here. Fortunately, we already have even more information because you did complete the survey online and submit the case study, which will actually help us go through the analysis once we're through collecting case studies in the end of November. But of course, I have tons of questions. I won't be able to ask all of mine, but what I would like to do is encourage people also in the audience to please do ask your questions in the Q&A box. So we're following that as well. But maybe I'll start just with one general question, and this is following up with the question about hope. Is, you know, what would you need to change in order to facilitate the integration of nature-based solutions, or EBA, in cities, and particularly in the cities that you have presented here today, or the case studies? Maybe we can start with Natalia, if she's still there, hopefully, because of the connection again and being on the road.
I don't think she's with us anymore, Jesse.
Okay, all right. Well, then we'll go to you, Mona Lisa, and then come back to Derek.
Like I mentioned, a lot of capacity building and awareness generation is needed to make cities understand the significance of blue and green infrastructure and not just gray infrastructure. A lot of this is coming through now, and COVID has also shown the need to be going in for ecosystem-based adaptation. So how we work is, in any city that we start looking for who are the local champions, and then use them to communicate the message further. That plays a much more impactful role than ICLEI trying to talk to everybody on individual basis. So we inculcate these local champions and then empower them, and they are the ones who facilitate the work further. That also helps in project sustainability once the project is over and ICLEI as such is out of the scenario.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Melissa. And Derek, can we hear from you maybe on that? The questions, of course, just in case you weren't able to catch it, is what would you need to change in order to facilitate the integration of NBS or EBA in cities, and particularly in this case, Mombasa?
Jesse, would you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yes, it is. What would Mombasa need what would they need to change to facilitate the integration of nature-based solutions or EBA into cities? In this case, of course, in Mombasa.
All right, Derek, were you able to catch that question? Sorry, we're facilitating this through multiple platforms. The question is, what would Mombasa need to facilitate EBA in cities?
Yes, sorry about the reception issue. Yeah, we are looking at integrated approaches in implementing EBA measures in Mombasa area. And this basically means doing lots of awareness and lots of support even in the international community to bring about proper and large-scale EBA measures within Mombasa area.
Excellent. Great, thank you very much for that. I will now look to the question box here, and we do have one, since we have you online, we have a question here from Katie Cashman, who says that in your presentation, you had mentioned conflicts between conservators is a challenge. And maybe could you just elaborate on that, and what does that mean exactly in terms of conflict? And then the same, of course, Mona Lisa, in terms of some of the conflicts maybe that you've seen in integrating some of these nature-based solutions into cities. But Derek?
Yes, yes, I got that. We basically have conflict not between conservators, but conflict between the surrounding community and the conserving agency. So this is talking about the National Conserving Agency having a lot of issues with illegal logging going on in the mangroves. And because this is also a resource conflict where we have the communities not having lots of livelihood and purely depending on the forest for firewood, for poles, for building timber and all those stuff. And the mangrove ecosystem is a protected area. So we have a lot of conflict between conserving agencies and the communities, big clashing between illegal logging and conservation of the forest.
Excellent, great, thank you, Derek. And Mona Lisa?
Conflicts, one, yes, the urban poor looks at these spaces as their only source of livelihood and food and resources. So when we bring in a project, the first thing that comes to their mind is their access getting limited, or do they need to move somewhere else? So that's when the scenario of integrating them and getting them on board in the project is very, very needed. Like the example of the Solapur Lake that I showed, community used to live all over, and they initially did not understand why we are wanting them to give us some land for the project. It was because the wetland, the constructed wetland has to come in some land, and the land is where they're living. Only when they, it was a lot of discussions, a lot of community mobilization that it took us. Then when we did the first step, they saw the water getting cleaned and they had access to the water. Nobody removed that access. That's when they started supporting the project further. That is the urban poor. Now, if we go up for, say, trying to do a policy level change, using nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation, there are areas where we might say that this area, if you do a restoration, that will be much more beneficial. So that at times comes in conflicts with the real estate, who are wanting to develop the area into, say, a concrete jungle of flats or something. So those are things which at the policy level are something which the governments have to handle, but that comes as a conflict, and I don't really have a direct solution to that, how to handle those kind of land level issues wherein we are wanting someone to set aside land for, say, a forest, and that particular person wants it because it's a private land. they wanted to develop a society or a real estate for for his financial things. So those are conflicts which still have to be looked into how to resolve, but it's much more simpler to resolve the access issues of the urban poor if they are taken on board, they understand the benefits of the thing, and as long as their rights to a certain area are not getting restricted due to a project, they will wholeheartedly support. So those are the kind of conflicts which we have seen, and we're trying to resolve as and when things come.
Excellent. Thank you much. Thank you very much. Very interesting. This links very much to the comment you had made as well, both from Derek's point on the communities and the agencies they're working with, to Mona Lisa, your point about the local champions. So another question that we have here from Kevin Webb is how much are religious centers providing green spaces in India? But I'll expand on that, not only in India, but also in Kenya, in Mombasa. So yeah, how much are religious centers playing in and contributing to this?
Right.
First let's start with you, Mona Lisa, and then go to Derek.
Sure. So religious centers, not the very small temples or mosques, but the bigger ones, have good amount of space wherein they are contributing to a lot of restoration activities. We have someone down south who's a very big religious leader, and he has done restoration of some huge amount of land along the river floodplain over there. And the other thing which is now coming up is India is still defining various categories under the other effective conservation measures, or the OECMs, which are reporting to the Aichi Target 11. So land which has been restored and is under any religious organization is qualifying for such a category. And traditionally, India has had things like which are called as sacred groves, which are dense forest patches, and they are maintained as such because people connect them to religious angles and have a lot of worship angles into that, wherein they do not go in and disturb nature. So those patches are also linked to some or the other religious organization, and they contribute immensely to conserving the ecosystem over there. So the religious organizations definitely are contributing, but if they take much more proactive role, a lot more conservation and restoration can happen. As of now, it's a lot more just on plantation, but if they move on to a restoration scenario like the one that I'm talking down south or in India, one has happened, such things will go a much longer way in India.
Excellent. Thank you. And Derek? Derek, are you still there?
Oh, there we go. So would you mind repeating the question again?
Yes, it was, the question was about how religious centers provided green spaces in India, contributed to these measures. But I was just saying that of course, the question about the role of religious institutions or centers is not just specific to India, but it can be applied in many countries. And I was curious, the same for Mombasa as well.
Wendy, could you please repeat the question so I can get that clearly?
Sure. The question is what role religious leaders, religious organizations can play in urban EBA in Mombasa?
Yes, Mombasa is basically an Islam city, but also mixed up with lots of religion in terms of Christianity, Hindu, all those sorts of religion. But we normally tend to look at groups, in terms of religious groups, in terms of Christianity, in terms of Islam, look at maybe groups like youth group, opinion leaders within the religion groups, where we like try to bring them on board in terms of looking at the problems within the ecosystem. How can we troubleshoot this? How can they as leaders contribute to bringing up more tree cover within the coastal area and also Mombasa as a region, and also encourage most of the participants to come and participate in our urban measures within the coast and also within the mangrove ecosystem.
Great. Thank you, Derek, for that answer. Just to remind our participants who are watching via the YouTube live stream that you can submit questions via www.mentimeter.com. The code is 7152779. Again, the code is 7152779, and you'll be able to submit questions to our panelists today. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that reminder, Wendy. I'd like to then, I'm looking at another question here and move a bit away now from the local champions, the communities, the agencies, and move a bit to the policy level. And also maybe, Kimberly, maybe you'd like to come in here as well. But there's a question from Alejandro Jimenez Hernandez, who says, are nature-based solutions, or the nature-based solutions you have presented, are they connected with the NDCs and the national adaptation plans? So I guess maybe we can start again with Mona Lisa. I know you presented different case studies, but in general, I guess the question is, how do the case studies, again, these urban EBA measures, how do they link then to the NDCs and the NAPs? And then to Derek, and then over to Kimberly about the work and the linkages between the policy and the ground.
Yeah, so the EBAs have a very direct connect with the NDCs. One of the NDCs focuses on a reduction of GHG emissions, which a lot of these EBAs connect to. There is the NDC which promotes green growth, which again connects to the EBAs that are under implementation. So there is a very direct connect to all the 6 NDCs that India is committed to through all the ecosystem-based adaptation work that is going on, not just what I presented, even in other cities that are there in India.
Great, thank you. And Derek? Derek and Wendy, are you still there?
Yes, we are. Derek, are you ready to respond to the question?
Yes. The question is with regards to national policy and that contribution to field implementation. We have our own government agencies, ministries of environment, international unions in the Western Indian Ocean region, where we bring in lots of policies that are actually community-based, where we can these policies can directly bring in sustainable development, and also bring in lots of initiatives and strategies that are community friendly and also ecosystem friendly, with regards to training, with regards to conservation measures that are taken up by the community themselves, and also encouraging and empowering community-based organizations to take up and own EBA measures within their region. So this is very, very helpful on our side.
Excellent, thank you. And Kimberly, anything to add here, or do you just want to wait to come in at the end?
No, I'm happy to add, not necessarily on the NDCs. I think the other 2 panelists are better placed to talk about that, but just to highlight that, within the forum, one of the things we're looking at doing is supporting the holding of the UN CBD COP15 and the UNFCCC as much as we can. And I think bringing in NBS and all the different aspects that we've talked about today into both, the global the post-2020 global biodiversity framework, bringing it into the CBD COP, making sure that these voices are heard within the different processes and procedures, and making sure that kind of these different elements are brought in, as well as the UNFCCC, is something that we're looking to do through our different platforms and networks. So I'd say that's also just another important element to add.
Great, thank you very much, Kimberly. I'm conscious of the many questions that we have here that are all really interesting, and also the time that we have left. So maybe what I'll try to do is just squeak in one last question if I can. And I'll just ask Mona Lisa and Derek to respond to this, and then come to you, Kimberly, maybe for some final thoughts. But there's one question from Jingwang Cheng, which is, how do cities account for justice in EBA projects? So that's a big question, but maybe if you can do it in 30 seconds, of course. Mona Lisa, why don't you go first, please?
Okay, so the cities in India who are pioneers in EBA are the ones who believe a lot in community participation and facilitation at all levels. So that's how it brings in even the economically weaker bracket onto a platform wherein they can raise their voice. The city of Kochi, which I gave examples for, is led by is actually known for such collaborative work wherein across all sectors, all levels of society, people come in together and take decisions. So the economically weaker section is always brought into it, and social justice angle is something which is very, very strong in that city, and they look forward to it.
Great, thank you, Mona Lisa. And Derek and Wendy, the team.
Go ahead, Derek.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so on our side, we actually bring about lots of programs that encourage 100% citizen participation into our program, and also try to implement lots of livelihood measures or livelihood-related measures that bring back lots of benefits to the community. And this is with regard to either tree planting, nursery establishment, doing lots of beehive farming, and also putting most of the forests that have been conserved or planted into carbon trade and carbon credits. And this is bringing in lots of benefits to the community. We are also trying to encourage all stakeholders and all groups within the country to participate in restoration and also conservation measures.
Excellent. Wow. Well, thank you very much. I really wish we could continue this conversation because there's a lot more interesting questions. And even on that last one, I'm sure we could dive much deeper into. But because of the time, I'm going to end now the Q&A. So thank you very much, Mona Lisa and Derek, for your participation in the session. Thank you, Wendy, of course, for actually making it possible for Derek to participate. And with that, I'll pass over to Kimberly Pope for some final words, and also to Wendy here. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. So, I mean, just to reiterate how great it is to hear about all this exciting work that's happening. And I'm really glad that PlanAdapt is also gathering case studies so that other practitioners can learn from them as they kind of start their journey or continue on their journey to become nature positive. Just quickly, the three kind of big themes that really stuck out and resonated with me were, number one, the importance of a people, nature, and climate-centered narrative. We can't forget people in this. And the second would be, you know, the importance of citizen engagement and their understanding, just as Dr. Sen had highlighted. And I think also what's important to us in our 1T.org work is really focusing on the restoration of local species, as Natalia is doing in Colombia. So I know this is all, I mean, even when I joined kind of this environmental world, it's so technical and it can be a bit overwhelming and there's lots of challenges, but kind of just as you were saying, there's a lot of networks and information and organizations out there to help. So it's important to keep in mind. So yeah, finally, the last thing I wanted to highlight is really the opportunities in this space for exciting public-private partnerships, particularly around financing. You can look to innovative examples like the Water Fund in Cape Town, Conservation International's Risco Mangrove Restoration Project, and other things like that if you're looking for some inspiration. So thanks so much. It was just really an honor to be on this panel and to meet you all. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you so much to Kimberly, and thank you to each and every one of our presenters today. It's been a great conversation. It's unfortunate that because of connection issues, we couldn't get that last presentation, but it will be, we'll send out an email to all the participants and the presentation will be attached, as well as the Eventbrite link will also have this. So as we're wrapping up, we're gonna have a final Mentimeter question. And so as that is queuing up, so we're continuing to receive case studies. Jesse mentioned it, the link has been posted. We do hope to hear a lot more from you in terms of the work that you're doing on the ground and how you're using ecosystems and ecosystem services to strengthen resilience of communities and ecosystems, and as well as reducing the vulnerabilities of communities. So do we have the Mentimeter slide with the final question? Oops, there we go. So yes, the final question is, what would you like to be the focus of the next Urban EBA webinar? We've had a lot to discuss. These are only 3 case studies of the case studies that we received. We would love to showcase a few more, and we're considering having another webinar in the beginning of next year. So go to menti.com rather, and type in the code 7152779 and let us know what you would like the focus of our next Urban EBA webinar to be. Policy. All right, so we have one person suggesting policy. I think a good way to also continue the conversation is for those of you who are participating today, think about people in your networks who are also working on similar initiatives, right? Or initiatives that, based on what we have received today, you think do fit the definition of urban EBA, even though they might not be called that. Feel free to share the presentation, or rather not, the survey with them, which I'd mentioned before. And this is a way for us as well to reach people well beyond our networks. And we can also have a lot more people who are working in city and policy planning and who can also contribute. I see Indigenous knowledge is coming in, as well as religion, the role of religion in EBA, citizen engagement, and M&E. Great, these are all great responses. So do share this, the survey, and then that way we can also diversify the case studies that we have. We do, Jesse did mention this, we would like to get more case studies from the Global South, just given that there's a breadth of work on the Global North. But if there are great examples from the Global North that do also incorporate climate justice or governance aspects into them, these are great case studies to include. Thank you very much. Yes, and so just to wrap up, again, thank you for your participation. This has been great for us. And let us know what you think about the webinar. And if you are interested in joining FIBA or the Green-Gray community or practice, you can follow the information from my colleagues. Sorry. There we go. Yes, so joining FIBA and the Green-Gray community of practice, you can reach out to Emily Goodwin or Emily Corwin about these initiatives. And the FIBA is, as Emily mentioned, an informal network on EBA in general, lots of topics that intersect with EBA. We hope that this webinar is a continuation of our conversation, and we'll continue to collect these surveys, as I said, until November 30th. So you can find the link as was shared. For those watching on the YouTube, we've been talking a lot about the link being shared in the chat. If you're watching on the YouTube, the link was in the Eventbrite invite, as well as in the description bar. With the context that we've received today, think about examples of EBA in your cities. They may not always be labeled as EBA. Do share these with us. We have plans to hold a second webinar, and that webinar is also going to share preliminary analysis of the case studies that we've been receiving so far. Thank you to all our speakers, Kimberly, Natalia, Derek, and Mona, from joining with us, for participating with us. Thank you to all of you watching from home. Thank you to my colleagues, Emily G, Jesse, Emily C, the members of the Urban EBA Working Group, and our team who's working very hard behind the scenes. And thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day.